Here is the history of the new kingdom of Egypt, told through the biographies of its rulers, who were sometimes geniuses, sometimes madmen, and sometimes all at once. We begin with Ahmose I, a man who inherited not a kingdom, but a lingering, century-long embarrassment. Northern Egypt was under the rule of the foreign Hyksos, who had long ceased to be guests and had begun to rearrange the furniture. Ahmose's ancestors had already tried to show them the door, but without success. Ahmose, however, approached the matter thoroughly. He didn't just fight. He besieged their capital, Avaris, chased them across the Sinai Desert, and ultimately expelled them from the country for good. After that, he turned south and pacified Nubia, just to get it all done in one go. Uniting Upper and Lower Egypt, he founded the 18th Dynasty and kicked off the New Kingdom era. In essence, he was the guy who, after a long period of chaos, finally did a major cleanup and changed the locks. Ahmose's son, Amenhotep I, was not so much a warrior revolutionary as a competent administrator who understood that it's not enough to conquer. You also have to hold on to it. He ruled for about 21 years, from roughly 1525 to 1504 BC, and in that time, he managed to establish order. He conducted a few demonstrative military campaigns to the south, into Nubia, and to the west against the Libyans, simply to remind his neighbors of the rules of good conduct and the timely payment of tribute. But his main passion was construction. He restored old temples and built new ones, and he also founded the village of Deir el-Medina. This was a settlement for the artisans who built and decorated the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Amenhotep became their divine patron, which was very far-sighted, to have a good relationship with the people building your house of eternity. Next was Thutmose I, a man with imperial ambitions. He decided that Egypt's borders were too modest and led his troops far to the north, all the way to the Euphrates River. Local kingdoms like Mitanni were, to put it mildly, surprised to see Egyptian chariots so far from home. It was Thutmose I who was the first pharaoh to decide that pyramids were too conspicuous and were constantly being robbed. So he ordered his own tomb to be carved into a secluded, rocky valley that would later become known as the Valley of the Kings. His son and successor, Thutmose II, however, did not make such a vivid mark on history. His reign was short, only a few years around 1492 to 1479 BC, and not particularly noteworthy. He suppressed some rebellion in Nubia, but he is mostly remembered as the husband of his half-sister, a woman who was preparing to show everyone what real governance looked like. And here she is, Hatshepsut. Formerly, she was only the regent for her young stepson, but she quickly realized that being a Grey Cardinal was not for her. She did the unheard of. She declared herself a full-fledged pharaoh, ruling for over 20 years, from approximately 1479 to 1458 BC. For the conservative Egyptian society, where the king was the incarnation of the male deity Horus, to accept this, she had to resort to a ruse. In official depictions and statues, she appeared in male form, with all the attributes of royal power, including a false beard. Her reign was an era of peace and prosperity. Instead of waging war, she built. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri still amazes with its harmony. She also dispatched the famous trading expedition to the mysterious land of Punt, from which exotic goods were brought back: myrrh, ebony, and even live monkeys. This woman was not just a ruler, but a brilliant politician who proved that to rule Egypt, a beard is not necessary, even if it's a fake one. While Hatshepsut was busy with the economy and construction, her stepson, Thutmose III, was gaining experience in the army and patiently waiting for his moment, and it came. As soon as his stepmother co-ruler died, he took power into his own hands and showed everyone that 20 years of waiting had made him very, very determined. Thutmose III turned out to be a military genius, nicknamed by historians the Napoleon of ancient Egypt. He conducted 17 victorious military campaigns, setting out on a campaign almost every year. He crushed a coalition of Syrian and Palestinian princes at the Battle of Megiddo, conquered the entire Near East up to the Euphrates, and created the largest empire in Egypt's history. But old grudges, it seems, are not forgotten. At the end of his long reign, he ordered the methodical erasure of Hatshepsut's name and images from all monuments, attempting to write her out of history. A classic drama of power, revenge, and perhaps how difficult it is to share a throne. The empire created by Thutmose III flourished. His successor, Thutmose IV, is remembered for one interesting story, which he himself ordered to be carved on a stela placed between the paws of the Great Sphinx. Supposedly, when he was still a young prince, he fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx, and it appeared to him in a dream. The Sphinx complained that it was being covered by sand, and promised Thutmose the throne if he would clear it away. An excellent PR move to justify his claim to the throne over his older brothers. But the true peak of Egypt's power came during the reign of his son, Amenhotep III. His era was one of pure gold and conspicuous consumption. The country was so wealthy and influential that it was, in essence, the sole superpower of its time. No major wars, only diplomacy, luxury, and art. The court of Amenhotep III was the center of the world, where the kings of Babylon and Mitanni sent their daughters to be the pharaoh's wives, along with tons of gold. And then, at the very peak, the unthinkable happens. The son of Amenhotep III, originally named Amenhotep IV, stages a religious revolution. He abolishes the entire pantheon of old gods, led by the powerful Amun-Ra, and declares that from now on, there is only one true deity, the sun disk, Aten. He changes his name to Akhenaten, meaning beneficial to Aten, and moves the capital from ancient Thebes to a new city built from scratch in the desert, Akhenaten. This was not just a theological dispute. The powerful priesthood of Amun controlled vast wealth and lands, and Akhenaten, in effect, declared economic and political war on them. Art also changed beyond recognition. Idealized images were replaced by strange, almost caricature-like portraits of the pharaoh himself with an elongated skull and feminine hips. This heretic pharaoh turned the entire country upside down for the sake of his faith, completely neglecting the affairs of a vast empire that was beginning to fall apart at the seams. After the chaotic reign of Akhenaten, his young son, Tutankhaten, ascended the throne. Of course, a 9-year-old boy did not rule by himself. Behind him stood influential advisors, particularly the old dignitary I and the army commander Horemheb. This cleanup crew immediately began to restore everything to the way it was. The capital was returned to Thebes, the cult of Aten was banned, and the old gods were given back their temples and privileges. The young pharaoh changed his name to Tutankhamun to publicly demonstrate his loyalty to the good old god Amun. In himself, he was an insignificant figure and died before reaching the age of 20. He owes his worldwide fame solely to the discovery of his nearly intact tomb in 1922. The dynasty ended with his advisors, first I and then Horemheb, successively taking the throne after Tutankhamun's death. Horemheb, being a military man with not a drop of royal blood, finalized the restoration and began to methodically destroy all mentions of Akhenaten and his heresy, preparing the ground for a new dynasty of generals. The childless Horemheb chose his old comrade in arms and vizier, a man named Ahmose I, as his successor, who ascended the throne as Ramses I, founding the 19th dynasty. This was a dynasty not of hereditary aristocrats, but of tough soldiers from the Nile Delta. Ramses I himself was already of an advanced age and ruled for less than 2 years, essentially just passing power to his much more energetic son. But Seti I got down to business seriously. He was a true restorer who sought to return Egypt to its former glory, lost during the Amarna chaos. He waged successful wars in Asia, reclaiming lost territories, and began the construction of the grandiose hypostyle hall at Karnak, setting the stage for his even more famous son. And here he is, Ramses II the Great, the pharaoh whose name became synonymous with ancient Egypt. He ruled for an incredible 67 years, from about 1279 to 1212 BC, and in that time, he managed to become a legend. Ramses was obsessed with construction. He erected temples, statues, and entire cities, not forgetting to put his name on them. Sometimes, he even erased the names of his predecessors on their monuments and wrote his own, an effective, though not very honest way to enter history. His main military event was the Battle of Kadesh around 1274 BC against the powerful Hittite Empire. From a tactical point of view, the battle was at best a draw, and for the Egyptians, it nearly turned into a disaster when Hittite chariots suddenly attacked Ramses' camp. But Ramses was a genius of self-promotion. Returning home, he announced his crushing personal victory, where he single-handedly defeated the enemy and ordered heroic accounts of the battle to be carved on the walls of all major temples. Ultimately, this battle led to the signing of the first known peace treaty in human history between Egypt and the Hittites. Ramses II understood, it's not what actually happened that matters, but how you tell the story. Ramses II lived so long that he outlived a dozen of his sons. Eventually, the throne was inherited by his 13th son, Merneptah, who by that time was himself of a respectable age. He inherited a difficult legacy. From the west, the Libyans moved on Egypt, and from the north, the mysterious Sea Peoples, who at that time were destroying civilizations across the Mediterranean. Merneptah managed to repel these invasions and erected a stela in honor of the victory. And on this stela, among the list of defeated enemies, there is one line that made him famous for centuries. Israel is laid waste, its seed is no more. This is the earliest known non-biblical mention of Israel. Thus Merneptah, who had spent his entire life in the shadow of his great father, accidentally entered a completely different history. After Merneptah, the dynasty plunged into chaos and a struggle for power. A certain usurper, Ahmose I, temporarily seized the southern part of the country. The legitimate heir, Seti II, eventually regained full control, but after his death, confusion began anew. A sickly boy named Siptah was placed on the throne, but real power was in the hands of his stepmother and Seti II's widow, Queen Tuzret. When Siptah died, Tuzret, like Hatshepsut, ascended the throne herself, becoming the last pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. But unlike Hatshepsut, she did not rule in an era of prosperity, but in a period of decline and turmoil. Her reign ended in a civil war that destroyed the dynasty. Out of the anarchy into which Egypt plunged at the end of Tuzret's reign, a man named Setnakht emerged. His origins are obscure, but he proved to be the strong leader the country needed. He seized power, founded the 20th dynasty, and in the few years of his reign, managed to restore order and stability. He was like a reset button, clearing the system before the appearance of Egypt's last great warrior, Ramses III, the last hero. Setnakht's son, Ramses III, became the last truly great pharaoh of the new kingdom. His reign was one long battle for survival. Just at this time, the Bronze Age collapse was raging in the Near East, and those same Sea Peoples that Merneptah had already faced returned with new, devastating force. They were wiping entire empires off the face of the earth, including the mighty Hittites. Egypt was next on the list. Ramses III fought them off in grandiose land and sea battles and saved his country from destruction. But this victory came at a high price. The treasury was empty, the empire exhausted. Economic problems led to the workers at Deir el-Medina no longer receiving their grain rations. And then the incredible happened. The first documented strike in world history. The tomb builders, respected craftsmen, simply sat down and refused to work, chanting, "We are hungry." This protest showed that even the divine status of the pharaoh could not feed the people. The end of Ramses III was tragic. He fell victim to a conspiracy in his own harem. One of his wives decided to place her son on the throne and organized the assassination. The pharaoh's mummy preserved the terrible evidence, a slit throat. After Ramses III began an era of slow decline, symbolized by a whole succession of his descendants with the same name. Ramses IV, the fifth son of Ramses III, tried to cope with the economic crisis left after his father's wars and organized large expeditions to the quarries, apparently to support the construction industry. Ramses V, his son, ruled for a short time and, judging by his mummy, died of smallpox. Ramses VI, the uncle of Ramses V, became famous for simply taking the already finished tomb of his predecessor, which hints at the general situation with resources in the country. And the reign of Ramses VIII was so short and unremarkable that almost nothing is known about it. The power of the pharaohs weakened, grain prices rose, and the country suffered from Libyan raids. Ramses IX to Ramses XI, the end of an era. The last Ramessides ruled over what was essentially a disintegrating state. The reign of Ramses IX is known for the high-profile trials of royal tomb robbers. The fact that even the sacred tombs of the great ancestors in the Valley of the Kings were no longer safe and were being plundered with the complicity of local officials spoke eloquently of the complete collapse of central authority. We know even less about Ramses X. His reign was short and lackluster. And by the time of the reign of Ramses XI, the last pharaoh of the new kingdom, Egypt had already effectively split into two parts. The pharaoh controlled only the north of the country, while in the south, in Thebes, Real power belonged to the high priests of the god Amun, such as Herihor, who even began to write their names in royal cartouches. Having accumulated wealth and influence for centuries, the priesthood eventually became stronger than the king himself. With the death of Ramses XI, the great era of the New Kingdom quietly came to an end, giving way to a time of turmoil.